So first of all, I would like to welcome everybody. And my name is Günter Burg. I am the Chairman Emeritus of the Department of Dermatology in Zurich, Switzerland. And first of all, before we start, I would like to thank very much to Professor Roth and his team and the Marcus team for giving us the chance to join this wonderful meeting. Now, as you see from the first slide, we are going to have 5 presentations. We start with Medicine in Art by Katrin Hoek. Then we have a talk on wax moulages between art and science, and on surrealism and dermatology by the Wollina from Dresden, and the art of dermoscopy by Professor Stolz, who is in Munich. And then finally, I will conclude by a presentation on painted age. Medicine in art. Medicine is an art, and dermatology in specialty is an art and the only medical discipline which cares not only for the health, but also for the beauty of our largest and most visible organ. And the following contributions, I mentioned them already, are intended to address the relationship between medicine and art. Katrin Hoek is a curator at the Kunsthaus in Zurich, since 2013. She majored in art history with minors in computer science and media science at the University of Zurich, and curated several monographic and thematic shows worldwide with partner institutions in Vienna, Los Angeles, New York, Bilbao, and others. In 2022, she curated Take Care, Art in Medicine at the Kunsthaus in Zurich. Katrin Hoek was listed as one of the top 100 women in Switzerland by the magazine Women in Business in 2019 and 20. Congratulations, Katrin. She currently prepares exhibitions devoted to Lydia Clark, Susan Duchamp, Kerry James, Marshall, and Claes Oldenburg, with partnering institutions in Berlin, Frankfurt, London, and Stockholm. Okay, Katrin, then please give your presentation.
So thank you so much for inviting me to this exciting symposium. Thank you also to Günter Burg. The paper I will introduce you to now in the next 15 to 20 minutes is based on an essay, an art historical essay I contributed to a book that Günter Burg published at Springer Verlag, editor Springer, in 2021. And so there are some ideas I take from this essay, and further I developed it further for tonight. And I hope I'm sure I will remain in the 20 minutes that I'm allowed to speak. So, also the skin is the largest organ and the only organ visible to the naked eye. It is far from adequately represented through art history. Old masters such as Lucas Cranach or academic painters such as Charles-Louis David are praised to this day for the depiction of human bodies in incomparable vibrancy. But the beauties so immortalized have almost nothing to do with the reality of dermatological science. This situation has continued to the present day, at least in the general production of images, and will intensify in view of the technical possibilities that are constantly being renewed. From the thriving cosmetics industry to improved laser treatments and lifting methods to face retouch apps or makeover simulations. Facial skin in particular hardly has chance to be authentic, at least in its appearance. It immediately becomes clear that the desired state is not authenticity, but rather the power to consolidate representation in the past or an increase in attention nowadays. Since we will most likely never meet in reality the viewers of our constructed appearance, it does not matter whether reality and image matches. These self-imposed interventions have become so widespread, self-evident, and even automatic that depending on the point of view, it would seem out of place, subversive, or simply careless not to carry them out or to deliberately renounce on them. Is there a problem? No. All fine? Okay, I continue. In short, the postmodern subject seems to be subject to a commitment to care for itself and to actively shape its body. We will see, however, that in the artistic practice, about which I will speak now, this longing for the construction of the perfect self is by far not the only goal. There is an established research around the incarnate, the depiction of the skin, but it is almost exclusively about its perfection. The aging of the skin and its visibility are not the same as skin diseases, but apart from that, in art history, beautiful skin predominates quantitatively. A particularly ambiguous example of actively making a skin condition invisible is the depiction by Jean-Louis David of the revolutionary leader Jean-Paul Marat, a doctor and politician who was murdered in a bathtub and suffered from atopic eczema. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I try. Let me see.
There's a curve. Yes, this. Yeah. So that's La Mort de Marat, a painting that you can see in original in Brussels, but actually is about French Revolution leader. The depiction, which is known to a large part of at least the Francophone population from their school lessons about the French Revolution, and which may be counted among the images in the collective memory of Europeans, actually shows the revolutionary leader treating his neurodermitis, but the cause of his pain is not directly recognizable. Instead of an ailing man, the painter immortalizes a hero in a corresponding martyrium pose and shows mortal bleeding cuts that are far better suited to heroic efforts than an eczema. The best-selling author, Mariam Küsel-Hussaini, recently made, this is actually in 2020, it's 4 years ago, made it abundantly clear that this distortion of history does not begin with the perception of art, but already in its production, and thus amounts to self-indulgent censorship. In her biographical novel, Tschudi, from 2020, of the director of the Berlin National Gallery and later of the Munich Pinakothek, Hugo von Tschudi forms the general theme. The stigma attached to the skin suffered is at its most evident when Küsel-Hussaini points out the incapacity of his friend, of Tschudi's friend and successful painter Max Liebermann, who is said to have portrayed all the women and men of rank and name. I quote, "When he, Liebermann, saw Tschudi's face, the lupus that was back like a curse that one had hoped to escape, his face fell for a second, great compassion mixed with anger that it was there, this disease. Portrait sessions were his daily program. He painted everyone who meant anything in Berlin. He had never painted Tschudi. How many times did he want to ask him to be allowed to? How often could he not at the sight of his sick face?" Quote end. Next slide, please. So there are it's almost impossible. No, actually, it's impossible to find any portrait of Hugo von Tschudi. And this is an early photograph when he not yet was affected by his lupus. Lupus is the autoimmune disease which Günter Burg also treats in the named book, in the chapter The Foreign Self. The disease recently gained a prominent face and thus growing acceptance with Seal, the pop music star and ex-husband of top model Heidi Klum, whose scared face became an unmistakable and highly contrasted trademark alongside his ex-wife's flawless complexion. Next slide, please. So here we see Seal at the Berlinale, a party, a People's Nights party at the Berlinale in 2008. Thomas Meissner's book, The Prominent Patient from 2019, presents an important overview of the significant idea that the production drive of large personalities could be attributed to their illness. Out of 100 selected cases, about 50 are from the cultural establishment, although only 9 visual artists figure among them, and only Paul Klee's systemic sclerosis figures among the skin ailments. Andy Warhol, who suffered from rhinophyma, the skin thickening around the nose associated with rosacea. I'm sorry if the pronunciation is not always correct, pardon, is associated with Asperger's syndrome by Meissner and not his also pretty famous skin disease. Next slide, please. So here we see the mentioned thickening around the nose, and well, it's a Polaroid photo, so it's not like digital photographs nowadays. And you might maybe be surprised that the location is National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne. As you know, Polaroids are unique prints made out on the spot. Paul Klee's case deserves special attention at this point, as the artistic procession of his skin condition is particularly surprising without the sclerosis being on display in a literal way. The former Bauhaus master and successful painter fell ill with severe bronchitis in 1935, and in 1936 his health deteriorated with a disease that he never mentioned by name, but which has since been identified by experts as sclerodermitis. Next slide, please. After Paul Klee had been defamed as degenerate, had to leave Nazi Germany in 1933 and had found asylum in Bern, Switzerland, this disease was his second major stroke of fate. This amplified exile from his adopted homeland as well as from his own body surprisingly had no crippling effect on his artistic activity, but on the contrary led to an almost explosive unleashing of creative power until his death in 1940. The most important resultant changes in the form of his artistic style were that, first, from then on, he created only small-scale works on paper, and second, that his virtuoso play with lines gave way to fragmentation and the reduction of the overall composition. In addition, his picture titles like Labiler Wegweiser, in English, Unstable Signpost from 1937, Maske nach dem Verlust, in English, Mask After the Loss, Ein Kranker macht Pläne, a sick man making plans, Schicksalsschlag, Fatal Blow, or also Last, which is burden in English, provides suggestive information about Klee's physical and mental condition. Another unmistakable feature of his work of that time is its reductionist humor, which is suddenly low threshold, and today inevitably leads to associations with the aesthetic of an animated film character a la Linea, or even with emoticons. Next slide, please. So here we have an example. There are several hundreds of that kind of drawings. Klee last, this painting, this drawing we see here, last, which is a burden, shows a sitting man in profile, bent head to toe in profile. The outlines of the clearly defined bodies, man and burden, set the limits of both worlds, and thus of the respective skin, which holds this world together and protects them from the outside world. In the 20th century, skin has thus shifted from being an individual mirror of our own existential orientation to an image of the state of the world around us. While the incarnate of the old masters seems to shine from within, from classical modernism, the emphasis shifts from the reflection on social political change. A special status in this development has tattoos, where individualized signs assert themselves against the increasingly anonymizing perfection of the skin. A very spectacular tattoo picture from the beginning is the portrait of the reporter Egon Erwin Kisch from 1928 by Christian Schad, one of the most important representatives of the new objectivity. Next slide, please. Schad is one of the great virtuosos of the incarnate in the 20th century, but not because he aspired to its perfection, but because he applied a hyperrealism that reached the limit of pain. In Egon Erwin Kisch's case, the skin surface becomes the bearer of political messages. Kisch was one of the most dazzling figures in journalism in the first part of the 20th century in Germany. The portrait is initially astonishing for its audacity. The bare, conspicuously tattooed torso stands in stark contrast to the harsh environment in the background. But this scaffolding is not a randomly chosen one, but rather that of the Berlin Radio Tower, and should not, of course, signify that Kisch is a hard-working metal scaffolder worker, but a journalist acting with comparable hardness and strength. He traveled half the world for his reports and invaded the most diverse, sometimes hermetically sealed milieus for the discovery of truth, which explains his demonstratively exhibited affinity for tattoos, which are sometimes also secret codes. In the 1920s, mass reporting experienced momentous developments, and for the first time, radio made the traditional media seriously competitive. Rather than being discouraged, Kisch inspired this competition, and he also tried to broadcast his stories in the new medium. And now we make a big leap to contemporary art, contemporary production in 2020s. As in painting, with the notion and canonization of so-called bad painting, with such representatives as Sigmar Polke, as well as Martin Kippenberger and Isa Gensken, to name only a few in the 80s, or Josh Smith nowadays, new and so far made invisible skin representation arise in the art world. I would like to draw your attention to only one of many relevant examples, which is Tshabalala Self. She combines textile textures and skin color with the sensuality and history of fabrics, as well as body politics. Next slide, please. So here we have an exhibition view in Kunstmuseum St. Gallen. Tshabalala Self, Tshabalala Self is an artist from Harlem, New York, born in 1990. There are implicit references of the highly problematic histories of the production of cotton, silk, jeans in the 19th and 20th century, but also its self-empowering moment in pop culture production, especially of Afro-American citizens. Next slide, please. So this is one example of combining different fabrics, textile fabrics, and making the analogy to skin and skin color as a kind of fabric around the body. Next slide, please. And one further example, telling example, as I think, with basketball players as the stars of African American, one of the stars of African American culture production, and this pair, this couple tenderly embracing couple with this very demonstratively displayed fabric on their skin. And I close my brief thoughts about a brief history of depiction of skin in art history with this image. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Sabina Carraro, together with Michael Geiges, is the head of the moulage collection of the University Hospital in Zurich and head of the medical human remains collection of the Institute of Evolutionary Medicine at the University of Zurich. She is a conservator, restorer with specialty wax and wax moulages. Okay, Sabina, please give your presentation.
Everybody can hear me? Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel. I'm excited to be able to give you some insight into the fascinating world of wax moulages and to explore what makes them so uniquely positioned between art and science. Of course, in the time given, I will not be able to build a theoretical conceptual framework on why moulages move between art and science. Rather, I want to give insights into different aspects of the world of wax moulages, and I'm hopeful that this intersection between art and science will present itself to the listeners. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. A quick glance at early anatomical waxes and collections, the Zurich Museum of Wax Moulages, their fabrication process, and finally, some examples from the Zurich collection of where the intersection between art and science seems particularly striking. In Europe, waxes and wax mixtures have been used to produce 3-dimensional anatomical representations of skin since at least the 17th century. Outstanding and famous examples of this are the waxes by Anna Morandi or Clemente Susini in Bologna, Josephtown in London, or Jules Barretta in Paris, which have survived to this day. The first wax moulages for the depiction of diseased skins were created in London and Paris from at least the middle of the 19th century, and from the end of the 19th century in various places in Europe, including many in Germany. Dermatology, at the time still a young discipline, was experiencing a surge in professionalization set in motion by new scientific findings and treatment options. Since then, moulages have enjoyed increasing popularity in medical science as a means of depicting clinical pictures in a 3-dimensional and lifelike manner, as they made it possible to document clinical pictures in their various stages. Wax moulages are three-dimensional, naturalistic molds of diseases, mainly from dermatology and venerology. Their hyper-realistic nature always made them perfect objects for teaching medical students at universities or for educating people about the danger of venereal diseases. One influential moulage manufacture was to be found in Dresden, on the left, an example from 1910. And finally, around 1917, moulage production began in Zurich under the then head of the University Dermatological Clinic, Professor Bruno Bloch. I will talk about the moulage artists in Zurich shortly. The Zurich Museum of Wax Moulages was founded in 1993 and is open to the public 2 afternoons a week. For a small museum like ours, we're welcoming a surprising number of visitors every year, at least half of them from countries other than Switzerland. There is a permanent exhibition, which also serves as a teaching collection. The museum offers guided tours for interested groups of all kinds and conducts university teaching and research. The collection is firmly anchored in the human medicine curriculum at the University of Zurich. A moulage shows only parts of the body, mounted in standardized form on a wooden board and usually framed by a white cloth, so that the viewer can concentrate on the symptom without distraction. I will come back to the technicalities of moulage making a bit later. So, in what manner are moulages positioned between art and science? They not only show various diseases in stunning and naturalistic detail, but they also clearly represent the individual, albeit in a physically fragmented way, the patient, their history, the time they lived in. They show the faces and bodies of people we never met but might have known, and they also tell us something about the doctor-patient relationship, medical treatments, and societal relations of their time. On the other hand, wax moulages form repositories of medical knowledge, but at the same time, they also represent contemporary body images. The fact that all wax moulages exist thanks to individuals with their own history should never be ignored when dealing with moulages. Most patient files in Zurich were destroyed decades ago. However, some small snippets of patient stories have sometimes been preserved on the backs of the boards. Others have been reconstructed from research publications. Thanks to this often very time-consuming work, we have been able to find at least some patient stories in recent years, and thus not only revealed and processed personal fates, but also the scientific findings and research results from that time. The Museum of Wax Moulages Zurich looks back on over 100 years of continuous moulage making. The manufacturing of wax moulages started as early as 1917-18 at the newly founded Clinic for Dermatology. Lotte Folger, a former student of one of the founding fathers of moulage making, Fritz Kolbow in Berlin, fabricated the first wax moulages for the Zurich collection. During her more than 30 years of employment for the clinic, Lotte Folger educated 4 students who continued to make moulages for the Zurich collection. Adolf Fleischmann and Alice Grettener. Grettener's moulages, however, belong to the Gordon Museum of Pathology in London today. Ruth Willi, and Elsbeth Stoiber. In the late 1990s, the present director of the museum, Dr. Michael Geigers, took over Elspeth Stoiber's knowledge of making moulages and passed it on to me in 2003. In contrast to previous decades, the production of moulages is no longer a secret. The long-standing, purely oral tradition of passing on the composition of the wax mixture, the manufacturing technique, ended in Zurich in the late 1990s, making way for scientific research into this part of moulage history, as well as for a hands-on approach. Today, we are a small group of people in Zurich able to produce wax moulages. Obviously, this knowledge is also particularly valuable for the conservation and restoration of wax moulages. In this picture, you see a moulage from a German moulage maker from the early 20th century, before and after restoration. Other fabricators often used a different mixture of waxes, which sometimes led to discoloration and so-called blooming of fatty acids with age. In comparison, the Zurich formulation has proven to be extremely stable. We have been able to expand this knowledge considerably in recent years within the framework of research projects, and all this not only serves to preserve and research the wax moulages, but is also particularly in the service of medicine and the lifelike representation of skin and venereal diseases. Through which artistry, then, do we achieve the goal of lifelike representations of these diseases? Wax moulages are traditionally produced using a plaster cast of the patient. When processed correctly, the finest details of the patient's skin are reproduced by the plaster. Today, of course, we use skin-friendly silicones. But traditionally, this plaster negative is filled with the prepared moulage material, a mixture of bleached beeswax, calcium carbonate, and dama resin, melted at around 70 degrees Celsius, and carefully poured into the plaster or silicone negative form. Once the wax has solidified at room temperature, it can be carefully removed from the negative mold, usually with the help of a cool water bath. Small irregularities and air bubbles are corrected before the painting process can begin. The moulage is painted in a layering process using an assortment of fine brushes. Ideally and traditionally, the patient is present for this part of the moulage making. If the use of photographs cannot be avoided, they must be taken in standardized light. During this process of painting, the dermatologist is consulted regularly to ensure that the reproduction of the skin condition is correct. Moulage makers must not rely on their memory or come up with creative ideas. In Zurich, we traditionally use 4 oil colors for painting: cobalt blue, madder lacquer, gamboge yellow, and a brown color named bitumen. These oil colors are dissolved in turpentine oil and applied to the wax surface in wafer-thin layers, working from the lighter to the darker shades. For most moulages, countless delicate layers of these colors are necessary to achieve the desired depth of skin depiction. Obviously, the process of creating a moulage involves many steps that must be carried out carefully in order to achieve the desired naturalistic representation of the skin. And as we have seen, the production of wax moulages stands at the interface between the medically correct reproduction of a specific disease and the highly differentiated artistry of its production and representation. The next few slides will give you some examples of wax moulages from the Zurich collection that are visually representative of their unique position between art and science. The moulage on the left not only represents the result of an experiment with the allergen of a primrose, but also captivates the viewer with the totality of the composition on the black background. The same goes for the moulage on the right, showing various stages of X-ray erythema, which in its entirety almost resemble an abstract painting. Equally striking is this composition, which shows the skin of a patient with arsenic melanosis, or the one to its right, which shows a patient with neurodermatitis, his face calm and dignified. Moulages like these are not only particularly realistic in a medical sense and in the way they are made, but also seem particularly radiant and expressive. The artistic and at the same time extremely naturalistic reproduction of this moulage of an embolism impressively holds up to close scrutiny. The lifelike and in this sense personal and sometimes portrait-like nature of certain moulages is enhanced by elements such as the use of glass eyes or real hair. At the same time, these stylistic elements are often used to produce an even more precise medical representation of the diagnosis. Further stylistic elements may include gloss, where the mucous membrane is concerned, using various kinds of lacquers, or skin blisters made of glass, waxes, or pieces of resin, or crusts and scales made of plant waxes. An interesting stylistic side effect with a medical historical background in the moulage to the left are the so-called diagnostic fingers. All these stylistic elements require a high level of craftsmanship, an artistic eye, and a lot of practice. Finally, Adolf Fleischmann, whom I mentioned before, also deserves special mention. As a young man during the 1920s, he produced moulages in Zurich and later became a well-known painter and exponent of concrete art and op art. His artistic flair in the production of moulages from surgery, which is a specialty of the Zurich collection, is particularly evident in the highly elaborated three-dimensionality of the depiction of the body and its captured movement and expression. In their strongest moments, wax moulages thus stand precisely at the interface between the history of the sick human being, who is of medical interest, and the artistic talent and realization of the disease by the moulage makers. In this moulage, the interface between the body, fragmented for medical purposes, and the vulnerable and diseased individual is particularly impressive. In this representation of a female patient with chemical burn scars, the interplay between the systematic fragmentation of the body and the underlying suffering of the individual is also rather moving. I hope that I have been able to give you an idea of how wax moulages as objects stand between clinical analysis, the human aspect, and a very special kind of art. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sabina. And your hope is realistic. You really could show the art and science of wax moulages. Thank you very much. Now, I call to Uwe Wollina. The next presentation is given by him. Uwe, I think you you did already, opened your presentation. Let me say a few words to your curriculum. Professor Uwe Wollina is had been the head of the Department of Dermatology and Allergology of the Municipal Hospital in Dresden, academic teaching hospital until 2023. Since spring 24, he is an adjunct member of the international faculty at Data Make Institute of Medical Sciences, deemed university in India. His special interests are dermatology, oncology, dermatosurgery, and aesthetic dermatology. And he is going to talk about surrealism in dermatology. Please, Uwe, go on. Give your presentation.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation and the kind introduction. And, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
And I will try to reflect some aspects of surrealism, which are close to dermatology. And I will start with the fathers of surrealism. This movement has actually two fathers. One is Yvan Gall, and the other is André Breton. And the movement, born in the 1920s out of the ferment of Dada, committed to revolution against bourgeois rationalism and was inspired by a Freudian exploration of the unconscious. And here we have Breton. Both fathers of surrealism had published their manifests in 1924. Breton said, "I believe in the future of resolution of the states of dream and reality in appearance so contradictory in a sort of absolute reality or surreality." And there are several principles of surrealism in different parts of art. I will focus on paintings. Here we see Sigmund Freud discussing with Salvador Dali, and Freud had a great impact on this philosophical background of this movement. Dali developed his concept of paranoia critical activity. He said, it's a spontaneous method of irrational knowledge based on the critical and systematic objectification of delirious association and interpretations for greater artistic creativity. So let's follow Dali through the window of art into the illusory world of the marvelous and the surreal. I will start with the subconscious and dreams. The conscious act of creation becomes replaced by the automatic impulse of the unconscious when painting such artwork like here, curves and circles. And indeed, it also occurs in a subconscious way in dermatology when people injure themselves, like in this picture of dermatitis artifact. Or it's in the unconscious state, like these coma blisters resulting in eschar after intoxication. Another important concept is psychic automatism. Breton described it as development in its pure state by which one proposes to express verbally or by means of written word or in any other manner the actual functioning of thought dictated by thought in the absence of any control exercised by reason, exempt from any aesthetic or moral concern. We see here an example of psychic automatism painting, an untitled Chinese ink drawing from Henri Michaud. When an experienced dermatologist is doing clinical cancer examination, especially for pigmented tumors on the skin, then he observes a patient And he performs instantly the selection of the lesions to be deeply examined. And for deeply examination, we have now very sophisticated techniques. This is one example of digital imaging. Dali is very famous for his images of soft melting pocket watches. The general interpretation of the work is that the soft watches are a rejection of the assumption that time is rigid or deterministic. Again, in dermatology, especially in aesthetic dermatology, we try to change time, at least the appearance. So when you get older, you might at least temporarily look younger. This is here an example.
אני בסדר, סתם רציתי לעדכן שהמסיבת רווקות של העירים זה בחמישי לאוקטובר, יום שבת. לא יודע אם זה רלוונטי לכם או לנו, אבל סתם אמר. סבבה. כן.
Can I continue?
Okay, go on.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Here we have an example of how aesthetic dermatology can change the appearance with botulinum toxin and filler on the neck before and after 90 days. Space and the metaphor. We visualize time as an element that moves and in which we move, reflecting our tendency to interpret abstract ideas through physical experience. What we can see here on these pictures is the development of an acne lesion, a pimple. In the upper line, you see reflectance confocal microscopy pictures. In the two lower lines, you see the optical coherence tomography. And in the bottom part, you see a three-dimensional reconstruction of the vascularity. So what we see here is the life of lesions. So skin diseases change over time. Metaphysical painting. It's a perfect substitute for human presence in the artist's mind, in order for the human being to become a thing. When we plan a surgery for reconstruction of the facial contour, like a facelift or a minimal invasive facelift with threads, we have to imagine the unseen. What will the patient's face look like after the procedure? So we have to abstract. And you see here on the left side, the localization of the threads on the lateral face. And on the anatomical preparations, you see the anchoring points for these threads. The usual and the impossible. Dali said, materialize the images of the concrete irrationality, with the most imperialist fury of precision. And we have here an example, Romeo and Juliet from Quarter. In dermatology, in clinical dermatology, we try to do the same every day. We look close and we see the clinical picture here of a 62-year-old man smoker presented with an ulcer on the tip of the tongue. And the usual is the primary suspicion, squamous cell carcinoma of the tongue. But by histopathology, it turned to be a traumatic ulcer of the tongue on oral leukoplakia. So it is a turn to the good, because the other one is a malignant tumor. The second example, 77-year-old female presented with a segmental pain, vesiculation, and subsequent ulceration. That is a typical picture of herpes zoster. However, histopathology told us this is a primary diffuse large B-cell lymphoma of skin after herpes zoster, and the dermatologist has to keep in mind that herpes zoster bears an increased risk for lymphoid malignancy. The skin between science and desire. Paintings also have a skin, a surface. These pictures illustrate how one can preserve or reconstruct the original color and texture of the painting. So every surface is a translation of nature, of eternal creation and decay. Wilhelm a Czech philosopher, said, "Not what the skin is like is a secret, but that she exists." Let's look on these pictures. Facial aging in the eye of the beholder. These are frontal pictures of women of different ages and different ethnicities. And people were asked to calculate the age of the shown persons. So the accuracy of the assessment of a woman's chronological age from a digital portrait depends on the ethnicity of the photographed person, but also on the ethnicity of the assessor and whether the assessor is female or male. So facial aging and facial beauty changes in the eye of the beholder. Strange face illusions. The loss of actual face recognition has frequently been interpreted in literature as a loss in self-identity. So it's a psychiatric situation. But in a recent study, it was shown that strange face illusions are a robust phenomenon being reported by almost 60% of non-clinical participants. So it's not unusual. Morphology and the truth behind. In surrealism, exploration of things is prioritized over discovery. And you see here this famous picture by René. And what you see is a pipe, and the writing says, this is not a pipe. So this seems paradox, but it's true. It's the whole truth, because this is not a pipe, it's a picture of a pipe. So in dermatology, we often see something and we have to look behind what we see. Again, this is not a pipe. It's very important when we try to recognize skin cancer. Here we see a small lesion on the inner canthus of the right eye of an elderly person. And you have to get closer to make the correct diagnosis. And what you see when you get closer is this lesion is composed of two. It's not a uniform one. And it's indeed a nodular basal cell carcinoma and an epidermal inclusion cyst, one benign, one malignant. So this is a good example of musk in a nest. Multiple skin neoplasms at one side, a challenge for the clinical dermatology. Surrealism features the element of surprise, unexpected juxtapositions, and non sequitur. The eye exists in its savage state. Breton said, the marvels of the earth have at their sole witness the wild eye. It traces all its colors back to the rainbow. Yes, surprise and transformation in dermatology is not so rare. We see here an example of a 42-year-old female presented with a growing, easily bleeding tumor on the flank, and the primary suspicion was amelanotic melanoma, a malignant tumor with a bad prognosis in this case. We did histopathology, and it turned out to be a vascular benign tumor, lobulated pyrogenic granuloma, turned to the better. Surprise and transformation in dermatology. You see here a lesion in the axilla of a 31-year-old female, a slow-growing, firm tumor in the axilla. The primary suspicion was dermatofibroma or dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans. But if you take the closer look, that's the picture B, you see a preserved auriculation. So in this case, the small muscles, erector pili muscles, are functioning. So this could not be a malignant tumor, and histology did show that it's a benign, a completely benign tumor. It's a dermatomyofibroma. So let's conclude with all. Science and surrealism. The conquest of science rests far more on a surrealistic than on the logical thing. That's provoking, but think twice. And last but not least, if you have a chance to visit my hometown, Dresden, we have a new museum in this old building with the archive of avant-garde from Egidio Massona, with a huge amount of examples of surrealistic art. And I hope you visit this and you will enjoy Dresden. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uwe. I hope you got not frightened by the terrible dermatology pictures.
No.
The good news is that we do all our best to heal those things. But very nice view on surrealism, on the relationship between surrealism and dermatology. Thank you. Thank you very much, Uwe. Now we are coming to another art. It's the art of dermoscopy. It produces lots of pictures, and it's presented by Wilhelm Stolz, who opens his presentation already. Okay, fine, Willy. Now, Professor Wilhelm Stolz is director of the second department of dermatology, allergology, and environmental medicine of the Munich Clinic, and professor of dermatology at the University of Munich. After training with Professor Braun-Falco from 1984 to 1992, he became deputy head of the Department of Dermatology, University of Regensburg, and was appointed in 2002 to the current position as a director of the second department of dermatology in Munich. His main interest of work are the diagnosis and treatment of skin tumors. Together with Professor Braun-Falco and Peter Bielek, he invented in 1989 the first handheld dermatoscope. And the pictures produced by this technology, which is very, very important for the diagnosis for each practicing dermatologist, but also for general practitioners, will be shown now by him. Please, Willy, give your presentation.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Günter, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very honored to be part of this highly distinguished faculty. So if you go to patients, in dermatology, the most dangerous skin tumor is malignant melanoma, as Professor Burg pointed already out. And here you see the different phases of malignant melanoma. You have smaller one, larger one, very peculiar one here around the eye. And it's very important to detect melanoma early. Why this is important? Because it's a dangerous tumor. And we have a steadily increase in number of these invasive melanoma. Here you see the trend in the United States from 75 to 2015, and it's more than third-fold higher incidence rates. And in 2022, the American Cancer Society estimated around more than 7,500 deaths from melanoma. Melanoma, as already pointed out, is highly curable when detected early. The survival rate is much higher when a cancer is detected in its early stages before it spreads to the lymph nodes or via the blood to other parts of the body. And a challenge for the dermatology is to find the malignant melanoma among all these benign monocytic nevi, or you can also say the benign moles. And maybe you have an impression here that this is really an outlier, and here another outlier in these patients. So this could be melanoma. And it's very important to detect the melanoma early before it spreads to the lymph node. In these unfortunate patients, you see here the melanoma, and already here the swelling of a lymph node, and in the lymph node there were melanoma cells. For the clinical diagnosis, colleagues from the United States developed a rule. A melanoma has to be considered if 3 or 4 out of these criteria are present. And this is similar to the evaluation of images: asymmetry, border irregularity, many colors in contrast to only 1 or 2 colors in the benign moles, and a diameter higher than 6 millimeters. And in a later stage, elevation is also a clinical feature, but we would like to detect melanoma early. Sometimes it's easy. You see on the back 1 mole, and it looks not very nice. So you have to suspect a melanoma. And Jean-Jacques Grob, French professor of dermatology, described a nice rule for detection of melanoma, the so-called ugly duckling sign. So if you have small nevi and a larger mole, so this is a high chance that this is a melanoma. But if you have larger brown moles and you have a red spot here in between, then also the small one can be the melanoma. And we investigate now this patient. This patient has many moles, but 1 melanoma. And you might also think, where is the melanoma? I give you higher magnification. Maybe you have already an idea. Still higher magnification. Maybe you have an idea. And this lesion looks really as an outlier. We look at higher magnification. You see it's red and also blue color and a little bit black color. And we have now the chance to look on in another image. And this is an image we performed with the dermatoscope, as already pointed out by Günter Burg. And this is the technique. This is a magnifying lens here, a glass plate at the bottom, and you apply some fluid that you have a better insight in the skin. And if you do that, you have a better insight into the skin. You can detect more colors, more structures, and this helps you to detect melanomas early. Here another example. On the left-hand side, this is a view with the naked eye. Here is the view under the dermatoscope, and you easily can see that you see more structures, more color, and this allows you a more precise diagnosis, especially if you have red lesions, as you can see here. This is a naked eye view, very difficult to evaluate. And if you look under the dermatoscope, you see the vessels, atypical vessels. And if you see these atypical vessels together with the brown color, this is a clear feature for malignant melanoma. So as already pointed out, together with Professor Braun-Falco and Peter Bilek, we were able to describe in '89 the dermatoscope. And a dermatoscope allows us to detect the small tiger. If the tiger is young, not so dangerous, and then we can remove the lesion and we can heal the patient. And here we published this finding also in the medical literature in Lancet. And Professor Wollina already showed you the new developments in this technique. So starting from the dermatoscope, the small handheld device in '89, now many different equipments were developed, and recently also with high resolution cameras and digital photograph photography, this technique was further developed in many centers of the world. And please think back in 89. In 89, we did not have digital photography. This was developed around the year of 2000. And from that on, also it was able to make digital photos everywhere. And therefore, the number of publications with this technique skyrocketed in the recent years. And we made also some research on the dermatoscope, which are the features for melanoma. And not surprisingly, the main features are similar to the naked eye view. If you have a lesion which is asymmetric, has many colors, has many dermatoscopic structures, this increases the chances to be a melanoma. Sometimes a lesion looks at the first glance very nice, here like a heart on the sole. But if you look with the dermatoscope, you see irregular colors, irregular structures, and unfortunately, this is also a melanoma. We published also some literature on this technique. And here I give you a naked eye view of melanocytic lesions. 2 of these lesions are totally benign. 3 of the lesions are malignant, and 1 lesion is in between. And it's from the naked eye, it's difficult to evaluate, but under the dermatoscope, it's easy. We start in this lesion. This is asymmetric, many colors, many structures. This is a malignant one. We continue with this lesion. This is very regular, symmetric, only brown color. So this is benign. The third one is dysplastic. This means it's in the intermediate. It's not perfectly in symmetry. It's a little bit asymmetric, but not so much. So this is not really a melanoma. Maybe it's on the way to the melanoma. We start in the line below on the left-hand side. So we have white color, brown color, asymmetric lesion, also small, but this is still a melanoma. On the first glance here, this lesion, you might think this is very dark and it's dangerous. It's a melanoma, but this is a special kind of a benign lesion, a pigmented spindle cell nevus, very regular, very symmetric. And the last one here is a malignant melanoma. It's an asymmetric lesion with different shades of colors and structures. And here I simulate the development of a benign mole to a malignant melanoma in these 4 examples. This is a naked eye view, not so easy to evaluate. And here I give you the dermatoscopic view. The lesion on the upper left-hand side has a regular network and has a brown color. This is a benign lesion. This is a benign mole. The lesion next to it looks also very symmetric, but we know at the periphery we have some globules. And if you see these globules, we know that this is a growing lesion. So this is a benign lesion, but still growing. If it's in a child or in a young adult, then it's okay with the growing. If you see this lesion in a 60 or 70-year-old patient, then it's not typical for the age this growing, and then it's a worrisome lesion. Here you see a small lesion, but it's very irregular, and therefore this is a melanoma. So this is the benign lesion, this is the growing benign lesion, this is the melanoma, and this lesion you already know, this is a full developed melanoma. And now we can make an experiment because we are in a workshop between dermatology and art. And nowadays we have the possibility to develop images based on these dermatoscopic images. And I made some experiments, and I used ChatGPT version 4 for the transfer of dermatoscopic images of these benign and malignant lesions in different styles. And you can indicate in this ChatGPT, please paint out from at the base of these lesions images in Van Gogh style or Renoir style, and I would like to share with you these experiments. And this is the experiments with the Van Gogh style, and this series of images, in my opinion, very nicely show what's really important and which features are very important for the detection that this lesion is benign or malignant. So in this benign lesion here, you have a very smooth area here. It looks very stable. In the growing lesion, the algorithm used makes it more active. It has more dynamic. And especially in the melanoma in situ here, very early melanoma, you have a really very dynamic, many colorful image in the center. The background is almost similar. And in the melanoma, you have an awful part in the body. It looks really dangerous. So therefore, you see this algorithm used in this painting process reflect and show the important structures. This is Renoir style, also very nice in the network, very stable, very calm image, but it's nodules here in the growing lesion. It indicates that this lesion is active. And if in the melanoma already early, you see a very dynamic image with many different colors, and the melanoma, it's like it's like an explosion here on the colors, brown colors, light brown, dark brown, and black colors. And here, as a third experiment with August Macke, again, similar to the Renoir style, so the features are almost similar. You have a stable image here in the benign lesion. In a growing lesion, you see this more dynamic. In the melanoma in situ, early melanoma, you see more dynamic, and also in the periphery, you see more dynamic, and you see a real awful image in the center in the August Macke style. So at the end of my presentation, I would try to simulate the process, how we can detect a melanoma. Maybe you have already the impression what's very useful and what's helpful. And I will show you a series of moles. And in your mind, think when a melanoma is coming. Normally, if I do it in presence, I ask the people to raise their hands if they see a melanoma. So this is not possible now, but do it in your mind, please. So this is a patient with numerous moles. So we look at the moles and please think whether this is benign or malignant. So this is quite stable, quite symmetric, one colors. And here it's irregular. So this is the melanoma. Again, 2 lesions, very stable, not very dangerous. Oops, this is, I think, asymmetric, many colors, and this is melanoma. And again, here, stable and irregular melanoma. Stable, 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 growing a little bit, but not dangerous. And here, growing, but more dynamic, and also initial melanoma. So I hope I was able to show to you that with dermatoscopy, you can make the diagnosis more at the earlier phase, and also that the important features can be transferred also in some simulated paintings. And one last thing, normally when things, if a new development occurs, this is really new. But with a colleague, I had the chance during the visit at the American Society of Dermatology in Washington to go to the Smithsonian Museum. And there, this is a great museum. And in this museum, it's also the display of the Apollo projects. And in these Apollo projects, 20 years earlier than 89, the lunar astronauts already took equipment similar to the dermatoscope to the moon. This lens was intended to aid the astronaut in observing and marking hand-sized specimens of lunar rocks. And it was carried out in Apollo 12 and 14 as a tool to work on the moon. Unfortunately, this tool was not used for that because the lunar astronauts had other things to do. So with that, I would like to close, and I would thank you very much for your attention with an image of a painter, a contemporary painter from Nuremberg in Germany, Oskar Koller. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Willy. Very nice. The different, I mean, the nature creates many different pictures on the skin. You have nicely shown. Still, I recommend each dermatologist to stay with the natural picture seen through the dermoscopy rather than having transferred by ChatGPT or anything else, by Dan or whatever, into Renoir or Van Gogh or any other painter picture. This probably would bring many more misdiagnoses, but thank you very much, very interesting. Now, it's my pleasure to come to my own presentation. And before starting, I will just say a few words to my person. I'm an emeritus professor and chairman emeritus of the Department of Dermatology at the University of Zurich, and I have completed my specialist training in Germany and in the States, and was appointed to Zurich in 1991. And my main areas of interest are dermato-oncology, telemedicine, and skin in art. And now, skin in art, the incarnate has attracted many old masters, and the paintings of old masters, and has been always been attractive for them. I have, in the beginning, I have to confess two conflicts of interest. One is with this publication published with Springer in 2022, which has been mentioned already by Katrin Hoek, who is a co-author, co-editor in this book. And my second conflict of interest concerns the various wiki platforms. But I have to mention that all pictures shown are public domain. Now, I will go from a dermatologist's perspective through the paintings of old masters of youth, of aging, and even eternal life. Starting with skin in fine arts in use, everybody wants to stay young and attractive. And in former times, this was also not possible, but it was shown by Lucas Cranach, the elder, in his use of beauty, where on the left side, you see that only women go through this bath, no men. And the women are brought to this bath by a wheel barrier, and then they go through the bath, and they come out from there and engulf and enjoy dancing and music and sex and good food and whatever. Now, today we don't have the fountain of youth anymore, but we have the beauticians, and we have all the plastic surgeons. And what have these ladies especially all in common? They are all body modified. They are smoothened with their skin and filled and Botox and whatever. Now, this brings me to the question of ugliness and of beauty, which has been shown in this book and described in this book by Umberto Eco in these two books, in fact. And the question is youth beauty? And if you see the skin in art, it's always does not have the lesions which have been showed by the speakers before, but the skin is wonderful. It's smooth. It's usually in men a little bit darker than in women, but this is skin in art. But in reality, skin in reality, everybody has lots of molds and in use, and even more additional so-called seborrheic or senile keratosis when people get older. Now, coming to aging, the aging means transformation of the skin from a comparable with fresh fruit going to till a baked the skin of baked apple looks like a baked apple. Now, this is the story of Aurora, so Eos, and the Titanos. Aurora fell in love with Titanos. Aurora, as a god, was eternal, was immortal. However, Titanos was a human being and therefore mortal. And Aurora went to the boss of the gods, to Jupiter or Zeus, and asked him for eternal life for Titanos. And the insidious Jupiter met this wish, and he gave eternal life to Titanos. And therefore Titanos got older and older, and he got folds and skin wrinkles and whatever. And because Aurora had forgotten to ask Jupiter also not only for eternal life, but also for staying young and for not aging. So this was the story of Titanos and Aurora. And this man, he is the front singer of the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger is somebody who cannot hide his traces after having got 80 years old, but he probably is at least eternal by his music. And pictures which show traces of aging are from libel, for example, especially in the faces, which you do not see here, but also on the hands, you see very nicely the 3 generations. Here again, 3 generations in nature, in a young, in a newborn, in a mother, and in an elderly person. And this is Gustav Klimt's picture of the 3 ages, showing the grandmother and the mother and the child. And in the middle of this slide, you see the transparent veins, and the skin has become thin. And so this is a sign of aging. And the same thing is seen here in nature on the right side of this picture. Another sign for skin damage is so-called senile elastosis, is a damage of the connective tissue, especially by UV light, and skin gets many folds, and gets yellow, turns yellow. This is wonderfully depicted in these pictures from Rembrandt. In a praying old man, you see the senile elastosis on the forehead, and in the praying old woman in the senile elastosis on the hands and in the face. Another picture also showing this aging by Wilhelm Leibel, a head of an old man, and from Grigoriev, the milk woman or the dairy woman, again showing these deep skin folds and yellowish discoloration of the skin as an expression of getting older. And even Picasso got older, even if he is eternal, has eternal life, but he has skin folds all over him, two portraits of him. And this is a picture with grotesque skin folds from an old elderly woman, which probably was Princess Margaret of Tyrol, a terrible lady, obviously, according to the history. And this is a picture from Quentin Massis, or Massis. Now, sign of getting older and developing of skin folds are also tear sacs, so called as blepharochalasis. And you see this here in a picture from Schlesinger. Here is depicted Hegel, and in a picture of Duber. And you see on the right side of the picture here, again in higher magnification, the picture of Schlesinger, and beyond this of Duber. And on the bottom of this slide, you see in the right corner, you see the blepharochalasis in nature. Now, coming to eternal life, it's certainly not easy to put eternal life on canvas, but knowing that tumors are just a conglomeration of never dying cells, it's a metaphor. We can have, as a metaphor, we can have tumors as signs of eternal life. So neoplasia are an unsuitable attempt of nature to ensure eternal life. And here you see tumors on the skin in the painting of Spitzweg, and he probably has a basal cell carcinoma, a white skin cancer, and there is the moulage also seen on the bottom, which shows many pre-cancerous lesions. This is a moulage from the Moulage Museum in Zurich, as has been shown very nicely by Sabina Carraro. Now, this is probably a basal cell carcinoma. So once again, a carcinoma in Edelfeld's picture of Louis Pasteur in his laboratory. And on the right bottom, you see again precancerous lesions on the moulage. And this is a cartoon from Passarotti, which shows angiomas in the yellow circles, angiomas, so vascular tumors, and shows in the red circle a cutaneous horn, which is proliferation, so again, neoplasia of the upper epidermal layers, proliferation of horn. And proliferation of connective tissue, these are pictures from Franz Lebach, who has painted Franz Liszt and Theodor Mommsen, a historian, German historian. And in a close-up view, again, you see the fibroma in Franz Liszt pictures and Theodor Mommsen, and down you see the natural picture of a fibroma on skin or in a moulage. Now, as had been mentioned by Stolz already, and also by Uwe Wollina, pigmented lesions can be very dangerous. and can be lead to death. So, but this here in a picture of Keupel is probably a beauty spot, which in the 18th century were very common to be used for looking a little bit more beauty. This is a portrait of the singer Pierre de Gélotte in a female costume. Here the question is, these are pictures from Terbosch and from Goya on the right side. And here again, the question is, are these beauty spots or are these dangerous precursors of melanoma? Here the close-up view. Again, you see the on the temple, the pigmented lesions, which could be either senile warts, which are harmless, or pigmented basal cell carcinomas, which are semi-malignant, or a highly malignant melanoma. Peter Anscher painted the Lars Kruse, a fisherman who had this in 1880 and 2 years later. And you see on the nose a lesion, a pigmented lesion growing over 2 years. And this is a pre-cancer, pre-melanoma, a so-called melanosis preblastомatosa or lentigo maligna, which also already has been mentioned in the nice presentation of Willi Stolz. Now, on the bottom, you see it in nature, a lentigo maligna on the nose, and on the moulage, also a lentigo maligna. Now, Lars Kruse, we don't know the fate of him exactly. He obviously did not die of melanoma, because he drowned in a rescue event on the stormy sea. As a fisherman, he was engaged in a rescue consortium, and he died and drowned. This was his fate. But what we know here in this painting from Goya, family car of Charles IV, is that Pepe, with her on the right temple, she had this pigmented lesion, and she probably really had a melanoma, because she died a few months after this painting had been completed by Goya. So she obviously did not have a pigmented lesion, a seborrhoeic keratosis, as seen on the right side, up and the bottom on the right side. Now, a retrospective medical diagnosis carried out work of art depicting a human person. A human person is is called iconodiagnosis, and it is limited by the own subjectivity, so by my own vision of the spectator and their background, which is dermatology in this case, in my case, and certainly can lead to misinterpretations. This is a big danger of interpreting these paintings of old martyrs. In conclusion, the incarnate always has been an attractive subject matter in the paintings of old masters. Secondly, the skin, usually darker in men than in women, in most paintings is idealized without any flaws. However, some old masters realistically have just reproduced what they saw without having the medical knowledge. And these cases looked at from a dermatologist's perspective, as I did try to do, may reveal challenging new aspects. So thank you very much for your attention. This concludes my presentation and concludes also our presentations. Okay, thank you very much also for you and your team for giving us a chance to participate, even if it's only virtually. Next time we will be present in Venice, and will enjoy certainly also the next round tables to come during the next days till the 8th of September. Thank you very much, and everybody, goodbye. Thank you for joining. Thank you.